parables these are. The parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin. Part of a series of parables in the Gospel of Luke, all dealing with being lost and being found. Now, the interesting thing about parables, the things that we have to remember whenever we have one of Jesus' parables, is more often than not, it really isn't that much about what we are supposed to be doing, as it is a way of telling us something about the nature of God. Not so much about what we need to do, but more about who God is and what God is like. And as such, the parables all have a bit of a twist to them. Sometimes we miss that twist because it was evident to Jesus' first audience, and it's not as evident to us in our culture, but they all have a twist. So that when the audience would go away after hearing one of these parables from Jesus, they would be going away with a few more questions. A few more questions about whether God really was exactly like they thought God was, or was there perhaps something they had missed? So parables always have a twist. And here, in these two parables, the twists are these two images of God. One image of God as a shepherd, and one image of God as a housewife, a woman. Now, because of things like the 23rd Psalm, we may not think the shepherd was that much of a stretch for an image, but in Jesus' time, in that culture, actual shepherds were not always well looked upon. They lived a nomadic life. They didn't settle in one place. They followed their sheep from field to field over the mountains, coming into a town at night and bringing the sheep with them and resting and getting up and moving on. So they weren't always trusted. So one of the twists would have been that that audience would have heard Jesus comparing God to a group of people that not everybody always trusted. The second image of a woman would have probably been even more shocking, because a woman was not really a person in that society. She was a belonging, like cattle, like anything else. She became a wife when her father basically sold her to her husband. If she had no husband and father, she was a widow, dependent on whatever she could get by with. She really wasn't seen as someone in her own right. And so it would have been shocking to compare God to a woman and a shepherd. Both images not particularly well looked upon. Images that would have caught the audience's eye, but not necessarily in a good way. But remember, Jesus told these stories, at least the way Luke tells us, he told them in response to criticism from the good religious folk that he spent way too much time hanging out with the riffraff, with the fringes of society, with the ones that everybody who knew anything considered lost. Of course, this is one of the big insights of the parable, that God is the kind of God who will go to any lengths to find those who have been lost. And it's the way we usually think of this parable, of both of these parables, isn't it? About these parables of lost and found. We usually think about Jesus trying to get across to all of us that God wants the company of those who are lost. He wants to find the one that's about to go over a cliff and bring that one back. He wants to find the one that's rolled off into a dusty corner, get it back in the fold. But that's not the only meaning. See, another thing about parables is that they usually have lots of layers of meaning, not just one. It's not like Aesop's fables. Now, we all heard those when we were kids. Aesop's fables, you know, at the end, there's a lesson, a moral that's meant to be learned. And sometimes we try to treat parables that way, but that's not what they're like. They're not meant to leave us with one lesson to be learned. They're meant to sort of explode our whole way of looking at things. And so they operate on many, many, many different levels. So yes, one level is about God searching out for people who are lost. But there is another level. Another level that gives a slightly different twist to this parable. And the twist is this: that God is the one who seeks and searches not only for those who may be lost, but also for what may have become lost in each one of us. That God also searches for what may have become lost in each and every one of us. Things like trust, wonder, delight, confidence, resilience. All of these are gifts that God gave us at birth. Gifts for a lifetime. Gifts meant to open our eyes and unfold our lives to the world. Gifts meant to connect us with the one who would lead us on that journey. Each and every one of us was given those gifts when we were born. Think about a baby. Think about the joy that fills that baby and surrounds that baby as he or she begins to discover the world. I had a chance to see this firsthand a week or so ago. I went to the high school football game. I was sitting with Jane Ann and Dan Miller, and also with Jane Ann's daughter Kendra, and Kendra's husband Lito, and most importantly, the 10-month-old Maddox. We were all in a line. I was sitting between Jane and Kendra had Maddox most of the time. But I could hardly watch the game. I was so enthralled with watching Maddox watch the game and experience the entire situation of being in that stadium. First of all, I mean, he liked to stay with his mom, but he would pass along each one of us. Such trust. I mean, just from person to person to person, he didn't care. Such wonder as he looked out onto the field and was especially enthralled with the band. The smile on his face, and he'd get so excited, no inhibitions, all this confidence. He was just as glad to shake his little hands and smile. Or if Kendra was holding him and he was looking back and smiling and just engaging all of the people sitting behind us and reaching out to them and doing all of these things. And then he got down and he bumped his little head and a couple of tears came, but they didn't last because he was right back there in the game. What's trust? What wonder? What absolute delight? What confidence? What resilience? Once upon a time, we were all exactly like that. All full of the joy and the connection when nothing stands in the way of our experience of God's gifts of trust and wonder and delight, confidence, and resilience. The problem is that somewhere and some way along our way of living life, we lose them, or at least big parts of them. And an even bigger problem is that we usually aren't even aware that anything's been lost at all. We get so used to measuring our trust, so used to being skeptical and not able to wonder, so used to containing our delight, so used to testing our confidence, so used to thinking that we only have this much resilience in us, and if life gets much beyond there, there won't be anything to bounce back. We begin to get those ideas over a lifetime of living life and bumping up against the different aspects of life. And yet these are the very gifts that God intended not only for us to have while we were babies, but to see us through all the bumps of life, not only up unto death, but even beyond death. So God is always seeking to restore these in us. Because whether we know we've lost them or not, God can tell. God is always seeking and searching for ways to restore our trust and our wonder in life and our delight in living and our confidence that yes, indeed, we are okay, and our resilience that says no matter how many times we fall down, we can get back up. Constantly, God wants to restore whatever we've lost that would in the end lead us to joy and a deeper connection